everybody. Welcome back to Every Genesis Song Ranked. Today we're counting down from 59 to 50. So, we're in the realm of things which, while they may not be flawless, are nonetheless pretty consistently really excellent songs and major parts of the legacy. As always, I'm Hans from Electric Brain, Electric Shadow. We are a contemporary art rock project which seeks to unite complexity of composition and theme with emotional nuance and accessibility in much the same way as the classic Genesis does, though, of course, there are many other sounds and influences that come into what we do. We have a couple of album playlists here on this YouTube channel, and you can also look us up on Bandcamp or your preferred streaming platform. Number 59, I have Get 'Em Out by Friday, which is one of the weaker tracks on Foxtrot, but that is, of course, incredible company. If you break it down, the structure of this song is surprisingly simple, even if the arrangement is complex, by which I mean, you can almost fit this into a mold of verse, chorus, verse, middle eight, right? But it's almost 9 minutes long as compared to, something like Can Utility and the Coastliners, which packs several more ideas into a space of several fewer minutes. Beyond the matter of length and repetition, it's a little bit stiffer and a little bit less atmospheric than the other classic epics. And none of the instrumentalists really turns in a defining performance here the way that they might on some of the best songs from this period. To be clear, this is a wonderful song. I love it, but it's still in tough company, and similar pieces from this era are mostly ranked higher. Number 58 is Ripples. One of the eternal debates about prog rock is whether the various lyrical tropes are emotionally hollow or whether the various figures of myth and fantasy are just as effective in their own way as a vehicle of emotion and human experience as, Lou Reed's famous line about waiting for the man with $23. Or whatever, I may have misremembered that. This particular song makes an argument, I think, really strongly in favor of the language of fantasy as a means of conveying real emotion. Its ruminations on sadness and loss and aging are cloaked in reference to history and mythology, but ultimately are still as emotionally naked as the writing style of this period would really allow. Now, the overall song maybe verges on a little too slow in places. If it were 2 minutes shorter, that wouldn't be the end of the world. But that churning, dreamy middle section really is one of the most sublime things that they ever did. And even if it overstays its welcome just a smidge, the song overall really is really quite gorgeous and one of the most emotionally effective things that they did in this period. Number 57, I've put 11th Earl of Mar. This is an ominous opener to what's mostly a relatively warm album. Like a lot of the things in this particular part of the list, it doesn't quite succeed as well as some of the other longer songs might. The vocal is enthusiastically delivered, but the melody's maybe not quite as strong as a lot of other things from this time. Where it does succeed, though, is in the playing, I think. Hackett turns in one of his most chaotic solos here to really fantastic effect. There's some great booming drum fills that kind of keep the pace and the dynamic up. Ultimately, this may not rank with the best epics from the period, but it is a really excellent piece. Number 56, I've put Abacab. There's a contemporary review of this song that criticizes the instrumental digressions at the end as being directionless noodling, right? And suggests that that is emblematic of a lack of focus in this time. That's bullshit, of course. I think, if anything, that final instrumental section actually suggests the greater level of depth and complexity that they would continue to bring to what's overall a more simplified type of music. Now, I've read quite a lot about this album, and I don't know that I've ever found a convincing explanation of what the lyric is about. Given that the title is nonsense, I suppose the song itself doesn't have to be about anything. But it does end with the protagonist waking wrapped in cellophane and maybe suffocating or not, depending on uh, if he finds the hole. So it's a weird, creepy lyric for a song that I think is overall maybe a little bit more weird and creepy than people pick up on sometimes. And that instrumental coda, right, with the weird little demonic shrieks and the kind of gradual synth washes, it really kind of matches the unsettled, forlorn mood of the lyric. I also love that really intense you want it, you got it section in the middle. I talked back in the Land of Confusion review about the skill that they had for middle eights during this time. I think this is another brilliant example. The reason I'm picking out all these details is that, this could have just been a pretty good driving rock song with a pretty good chorus. But the attention that they've put into the oddity of the lyrics, the expansiveness of the coda, the middle eight, right? Those show, I think, the level of craft that they brought to what seems on the surface like a more simplified style of music. Number 55, I have A Trick of the Tail. Just like I mentioned with Ripples a couple songs ago, there's real sentiment conveyed here in a fantasy context. And personally, even though, as a block, I'm ultimately more attached to the Gabriel years, I do have to admit that there's a level of emotional power that this song has that, in a more purely sentimental way, that none of the Gabriel stuff does, at least for me. The vocal line is admirably melodic and nimble for how many words are being packed into it, and you really have to appreciate the overall restraint in the arrangement. So number 54, I have put Squonk. The core of the appeal here, I think, is the contrast between the kind of simple, punchy, a little bit Kashmir imitating, as they've admitted, kind of core riff, and the really sort of wordy, elaborate vocal melody, right? So the way that those two layers play off each other is a very interesting effect. I notice as well that there are all kinds of enjambment effects here where the ends of lines in the lyric don't necessarily have a relationship to the ends of lines in the music. Even a couple of years after this, they probably would have written a very different vocal part for a song like this. Number 53, I've put Robbery, Assault, and Battery. This is a song whose main bones are maybe a little underwhelming at a composition level. The bouncy rhythm of the verses is a bit cloying. The vocal line is a little obvious, a little unmelodic. The chorus in particular feels chanted more than sung. But, I make all those initial criticisms of the underlying writing as a way to set up how remarkably effective the playing and arrangement are here. The instrumental breaks are all wonderful. My favorite part is the solo after the second chorus, which is, it's great throughout, but it really kind of achieves nirvana with that soaring guitar part right after the vocal interlude. That's another one of those bits, like the midsection in Abacab, that as a teenager I would just rewind and listen to over and over again. Another detail I didn't notice until recently, check out how the drums under the first chorus are essentially playing a disco beat, while under the second chorus they're doing something much more active and syncopated and slippery. That's an amazing detail in a song that is full of them. And, this is about as good an example as I can think of where maybe a little bit pedestrian writing is just stratospherically elevated by amazing arrangement and playing. Number 52, I've put Horizons. This is one of those short pieces that's a little hard to fit into a ranking. On the one hand, it's basically an interlude and doesn't necessarily feel complete to me if it's not leading into Supper's Ready. On the other hand, I absolutely cannot imagine a more perfect 90 seconds of neoclassical guitar. Number 51 is Looking for Someone. I've read interviews where the band trace parts of this song back to Peter's interest in soul music, which makes sense once you hear it, if you grant that it's about as dour and alien a version of soul music as you can imagine. As with a couple of the other songs on Trespass, this song doesn't always get its momentum right. There are stops and starts and builds that don't quite take off. The crescendo, when it does arrive, seems like it comes a bit from nowhere. But the atmosphere here is just wonderful, right? Peter nails the paranoia and desperation of the lyric, and all the instrumental parts are really exciting, really compelling, even if sometimes the seams where they're put together are a little bit rougher, a little more obvious than they would be on some stuff from a couple years later. Number 50, I have Down and Out. That opening sustained synth note is a perfect mood setter, probably something they wouldn't have done before now in its minimalism, but one of the first signs of how they would begin to very effectively use more simple arrangements going forward. The song itself is really arguably the first great achievement of the trio era, which I guess makes sense because, chronologically it's the first song of the trio era. But the verses just really thrash and churn in a very convincing way, in an odd time still. And the chorus really provides a huge sense of lift. Now, some critical things get said about this album overall, but I think that it's gained some respect in the last few years. And you can grant that maybe it's a bit weaker than what came before or after, and still point to this song as a highlight in the entire catalog. All right, thanks much for sticking with us this far. Next week, we'll be getting into the 40s, so you can look forward to more increasingly enthusiastic reviews. Thanks much, everybody, for your time and attention, and I will see you later.